Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets close out the preseason with arguably their best performance. We break down the high-level functionality of what they did on both ends of the floor, if some of the new look rotations could be valuable in the regular season, and if we in fact have the right sample size on a quality bench unit. Let's dive in next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie. Over here, you're going to find Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and let you know to go ahead and head over to joinsubtext.com right now so you can be a part of the Locked On Nets Insiders, the breaking news, the inside scoops, and exclusive content delivered directly to your phone. Plus, the best part is one-on-one conversations with Doug Norrie and myself. Go ahead and get over there on the 14-day free trial as well. And Doug, we said it at the top. We'll say it again here. Was this the best performance that we have seen from the Brooklyn Nets so far this preseason?
I think so. I mean, I even with some struggles early, even with some sloppiness early, I think that this is probably one of the strongest showings that they've had. I think this was the closest that you're going to see that we've seen so far in the style that they want to play. This is like and we'll go through sort of what we mean by that stylistically. I think there were some very clear marching orders around like what needed to happen for them on both ends of the court. And I think even trying not to be too results oriented, especially around some of the shooting stuff from the starters, I think it's hard to look at this and not think like, okay, I think we have at least have a clear idea of what this team wants to be identity wise. And some of it needs to be cleaned up. But I was really, even early when it was kind of tough to watch, I was still really encouraged actually with what was happening. It's just like, I just didn't think the shots were falling. I think so. We'll go into all that, but yeah, to short answer around the performance here, even if this had been a loss at the end, I still would have walked away from this thinking, okay, I think I know it. I can picture what this team really wants to be this year. And I can see paths to how they can make it successful.
Yeah, there's some individual performances. I mean, we'll get into Ben Simmons, obviously, who continues to look strong here. And you mentioned that idea of, we talked about this even going back to previous iterations of this team. Whether or not the ball goes through the basket cannot be the ultimate measure of whether or not the plays are successful and whether or not we think the team is successful. Now, ultimately, it does have to go through if you want to win some basketball games, but right, doesn't hurt. But when you get to the end of this one and it's a 107-104 meaningless preseason victory against the Miami Heat, once that revved up, I think to your point, initially you're not seeing the shots fall, but all of the process is correct, and you feel like over the remainder of this game, where as Jacque Vaughn said, he was going to run the starters significant minutes, everybody got into the 20s. So you got enough of the return on that investment, right? That yes, this can work. You can have these players, veterans, and some of the new additions as well that we'll discuss, contributing in key ways. And I think the functionality offensively with Ben Simmons is something that we've seen glimpses of. I also thought that tonight was the best example defensively about how their length, some of the switching, the drop coverage, by and large, with maybe one minor exception on the roster, I thought everyone looked really good at that end of the floor too, which is really rewarding to see as you cap off the preseason.
Yeah, like we'll start on the offensive end for me. Like here, my biggest concern going into this season was, combining Simmons and Claxton on the court together, whether or not the Nets were going to be able to manufacture enough spacing to have a good functional 2023 offense, right? And I think that's a realistic concern when you have two guys that are just non-spacers and just they bring a lot of skill to the game. It's just not spacing and shooting. And can that function in a world where we know spacing and three-point shooting is of the utmost importance in the current NBA? I think what we saw tonight actually was the first time I really felt pretty strongly on it not being, because I had disaster in the range of outcomes. Now, maybe that's not totally fair, but I thought it was on the table, at least as a possibility. I think what we saw tonight from them was a very clear idea around, like, specifically Simmons saying, okay, as many times as possible, he needs to get into into space, into like, foul line and down space as much as possible to be able to kick it out. And other guys, the second that first defender is back heeled, whether it's him or Bridges or Dinwiddie or anybody, the ball has to start popping as much as possible around the perimeter. And I did think we saw that. I think we saw initial drives where the Nets guys were able to beat the first point of attack defender and then initiate ball movement beyond that. Again, results were sketchy because the shots didn't fall. They had a ton of good looks early, a ton. And when that's saying a lot when you have guys like Claxton and Simmons that are going to draw defenses all the way down. But if they're able to suck one or two defenders into the space with those first movements, then I think we saw glimpses of how that spacing can start to really formulate. And that I found to be really, really encouraging. So maybe I undersold it about the possibility of it happening, but not just Simmons. I mean, Dinwiddie, Bridges, they all were like first movement to the basket, and let's see what happens after that. And I think that if everyone's bought into that style, they can get away with not having Simmons and Claxton having be able to space.
Yeah, I think crispness of passing, not just from Ben Simmons, but we've said this before in previous seasons as well. If they kept the stat like the NHL does for not only the assist, but the assist to the assist, boy, this would fill out in a much more impressive way, and I think a more telling way across the stat line. Spencer Dinwiddie, man, I'm going to touch on him here specifically. You and I have never been anti-Spencer Dinwiddie, but we've also just been reality-based around what we think the organization should be doing in this moment and how he fits in. We've often said players are, of course, going to benefit from Ben Simmons. This final preseason game, to me, was an excellent sample size of how well he can work with Ben Simmons on the floor. And I thought this was that, I'll say the first half specifically with Spencer, a 9-4-4 line. He was doing everything that you want him to do. And honestly, I thought that his passing, which we know is one of his strengths, but now, as you mentioned, that pushing by Simmons into the paint and the space it creates, you can see a lot of trust in Spencer Dinwiddie to make that right next play, whether it's the ball in his hands or getting it to a corner shooter, Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith in this case as well. So I really was offensively impressed with the step that they took forward tonight relative to what we saw in the first 3 preseason games.
And we saw him just even being a corner shooter for himself. Like we've seen multiple times Dinwiddie living in the corner of, just that about where he might start to operate. Like we saw last game where, Simmons had the, crazy behind the back pass, but he had multiple corner looks in this game also. And that's just a different version of him, whether he, took corner threes or was able to make the next pass, like, sort of a foul line extended above the break stuff where you're going to see Bridges live a little bit more. We've seen DFS pop off from there like that. And those initial actions, it's just not as concerning. Now, look, when we get to sort of higher level defenses and full starters and like, what's that going to look like? Yeah, I will see. We'll talk about the defense here in a second, obviously too, but these are still preseason games and we haven't gotten best foot forward from all the teams that the Nets have played. But again, stylistically, if you're looking for what we think the Nets sort of want to be in their core values in terms of like style on offense, this is the agenda they have to push all the time. And it takes a lot of energy. And it takes a focus. It takes more focus than just watching Kevin Durant and Kyrie get into the mid range. You know what I mean? Like it takes, there's more that needs to happen here. But if they can be bought into this style over and over and over and over again and live with some of the downside at times, ugly finishes at the rim or just missed threes, they just have to stay on this path. And I think this path is the best path for them, for their current personnel, to really gain results.
At the back end of this episode, we're going to spotlight some of the bench unit standouts like Lonnie Walker and Day'Ron Sharpe. But coming up here in a second, the Brooklyn Nets and Jacque Vaughn also showcased some new rotations that accentuate why the Nets may not have the highest ceiling of quality players, but they do have the depth to create balanced units throughout the course of a game. We'll break those down coming up next.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at Jase Medical. Look, when it comes to your health, we've said this many times, the worst thing you can be is unprepared. Like my family, we traveled a lot, right? We've been to other countries. We know that sometimes getting medical attention and getting what you need, even when you're out there traveling and seeing the world, it can be tough. Like, things are just different in different places. Jase Medical helps you solve this problem. They have a personalized emergency medication kit. It's got 5 essential antibiotics to treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections you can have. Don't we live in a world of uncertainty, right? We've got storms, we've got supply chain issues, all this different stuff that can happen to you out there in the world. Don't have something like your medical stuff be something you bet on. Don't roll the dice on it. Go with the Jace case. Maybe get the Jace case for a friend. Get a gift card. They have that going for them too. All you want to do with Jace case, you go to jacemedical.com, enter the code locked on at checkout for a $20 discount. Jace has solved this stuff, folks. Doctor approved. It's the medication you need. Go and get it. Don't live with uncertainty. jacemedical.com, enter the code locked on, $20 off, a discount on that order. Promo code locked on at jasemedical.com.
All right. Not only do we thank you for being a part of our post-game live over on YouTube, where we expect it now that you're in there waiting hungrily for us to come in and break down these games, but also
demand
it free on all those platforms. Huh?
We're gonna demand it from you. We don't just expect it. We're gonna
the threshold here we've crossed. We're no longer is it just really nice to see you there. There's actually a bit of an expectation now. So don't let us down. We're kind of desperate for the attention.
Disappointed if you don't follow through out there, YouTube people. Come on.
I love the effort, but I'm a little disappointed. As we think about this team and this game in particular, the other thing that I thought, now we know there's no Cameron Johnson in this one. And guess what? On our Friday episode, be sure to be there for that because it's going to be our overall preseason takeaways. One of the talking points is going to be how Cameron Johnson was supposed to play in the preseason. We were told he would play in the preseason. That was the expectation. So is that injury a little bit more concerning? Dorian Finney-Smith plays really well stepping into that starting role tonight. But the other thing that Jacque Vaughn did in this game, I thought, was showcase different units and different versions of trying to spread out the Ben Simmons and Nicholas Claxton minutes, trying to spread out the Mikal Bridges and Spencer Dinwiddie minutes. Specifically when they had Nicholas Claxton on the floor with Spencer Dinwiddie, Cam Thomas, Lonnie Walker, and Royce O'Neal. Now, is that going to survive all the time in matchups in the NBA? No, not from a size standpoint, but it's one of the first samples we've gotten of let's get ball handling, on ball creation heavy here, and then keep our defensive anchor on the floor. I was impressed by, frankly, the run that they had there because they did hold their own on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, the defense has been dialed up here a little bit, and they're starting to solve some of the issues that plagued them. I think we've seen guys like Walker really balled out, and Cam Thomas was able to, sort of live with a 3 for 14 shooting night by going 7 for 7 from the line. Getting to the line was really, really important for the Nets in this game. I think that tightening up the rotations, which they did significantly here, right? Like, they're really only 9 guys played, like real minutes. I'm not going to count like the Jalen Wilson or Monty Brooks stuff at the end. This was a 9-man rotation. Hopefully that is, one, that's going to be more analogous to what's going to happen in the regular season. 2, they do have a lot of overlapping personnel or sort of personnel that can live with a lot like significant or a lot of different kinds of units. So I do expect there to be some consistency there, especially defensively, and with just enough scoring to be able to live with some of these rotations. And that's good to see because, right, like we know Claxton and Sharp are going to have to play a little bit different defensively. We've seen some more drop coverages. We've seen them vary up these coverages a little bit. But it is encouraging, like you said a second ago, to see combinations of guys that can work together. And we know that some of these guys a lot of these guys are actually a little more mix and match than maybe we thought they were. And so that is, it is an encouraging thing to see that there does seem to be, at least in this game, some cohesiveness around guys that really haven't played together at all. But you can tell from their overall skill sets that they probably are going to work together decently long-term, or at least in short stretches.
And I mentioned this here before the break about how we know the Nets do not have, the 2 and 3 superstars on this roster, though the Ben Simmons journey this season is going to be fascinating to watch and where he ends up ultimately ranking, relative to where he once was a few years ago. But this is where when I mentioned Mikal Bridges and Spencer Dinwiddie. Okay, they keep them together, but they take Ben Simmons is now off the court. And then you had Claxton out. But then you also brought in Day'Ron for a stretch with some of those starters. When you brought Ben Simmons back in, even though we think that now Cam Thomas is identified in this bench role, he comes in with Ben Simmons. So they kept finding a way, I thought, to mix and match these things successfully, that if we midway through this season compare across the league, how often do you get back to your true starting 5 and stick with it? The Nets did that coming out of the second half in this one based on who they started with. But I think you're going to see this version of it because they know they have enough. There's enough scoring here. There's enough ball handling there. But we can't isolate these 2 units and think that that second unit is going to survive unto itself, because at some point it's going to fall down. And I think maybe on both ends of the floor. and we can get into the Cam Thomas defensive experience in this game as well. So I think there's value in that. And I would expect that they will be far more fluid in what the in-game rotations look like relative to who actually starts the games.
Yeah, I think like maybe like a concise way to say that would be like the Nets have like not as much clearly don't have as much top end talent, but they have a smaller gap between like let's say their third and 10th player than some other teams.
Yes.
Right? Like so like there's again, they're not living this isn't a Durant Booker Beal combination obviously at the top end of the lineup, but when you get down to guy 10, I think we're seeing that you can feel pretty confident with those, or because I'm going to put guy 10 because I'm going to add Cam Johnson into this, like, and he fits, and we know his role is going to fit pretty well with almost any combination. So yeah, I think that's gonna be good. But so when we look at these 10 guys that are probably at least what they're signaling here, what Jacque Vaughn is signaling is like, hey, these are the guys, right? Like when we're going to the regular season, I think we pretty much know our 10 guys, maybe you throw DSJ in there too. But you feel pretty good about guy 8, 9, 10 in a way that it can actually getting them out there for minutes is not something you would maybe see from some other teams, because when you have sort of top end, really, really expensive talent, you just can't fill in your roster to cover enough of the back end of the depth. And I do wonder how much that's going to help them just in terms of overall pace and overall like conditioning and things like that, to be able to mix and match these guys, or which I think we'll also see, take advantage of what other teams' weaknesses might be by just putting the best 5-man combinations out there, depending on the opponents, right?
Yes.
If they're starting
to flexibility too, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Like, this is our best version tonight. Most NBA teams are not going to look at it that way. Top end teams are going to say our best team is our best team all the time. The Nets are going to look at it through the prism of our best team tonight might look different than it will 2 nights from now, depending on matchup. Before we move into the bench unit, let's just touch on Cam Thomas. We talked about him a lot this offseason. Yep. I said Spencer Dinwiddie at the top. I thought his performance tonight was a real arrow through the heart of my case for Cam Thomas to maybe be in this starting unit. Defensively, and it happened again, put another arrow through the heart, was in the first quarter. I thought, hey, he is showing the effort that we wanted to see from him. Just show that you have the effort. The second quarter, as you were pointing out, was, well, the effort might be there, but this guy doesn't know where to put that effort. He looked very lost, and I'm not even knocking him for it. He's a young player. There's a lot of new things being introduced here. The defensive end is where he has to still learn and process. But this to me speaks to why the Nets still have some veterans on this team, why they maybe didn't feel comfortable moving off of certain guys, and why you brought in a Lonnie Walker and a Dennis Smith Jr. It's the just in case here, because there are still going to be growing pains. Not a bad thing, but it's a reality, I think, in this finale for Cam.
Yeah, like he just lost his assignment a few times. They got back cut a few times. It's hard. Again, I think they're switching up schemes because they did switch between dropping and switching a bit more. It was switch heavier, but then they get into the drop. It's tough too. I kind of don't want to totally dig Thomas. Like they are going through different scenarios here. But it was clear, like there's times where it's just like he's just a little lost. One thing that I think I want to touch on probably in another episode too, but it's good to start for everyone to think about, is one thing I noticed actually a little bit more tonight than I had in the past, is that with drop coverage too, you really need to have, not only do you need to have your guards fighting over screens and really being very, very dialed into that effort, you also like need to be good trailing defenders. Like, so if you think about like the guys like Drew Holiday, who's like the best in the league, it's like, hey, you stay level on the screen and came around it. Oh, okay. Oh, you think you're past them? Well, you're not. Like you're getting blocked from behind. You're getting blocked from behind. You're gonna get really hounded, even because they're gonna stay like sort of on the level on your hip coming around the back of the screen, even if they didn't get fully over it. The Nets kind of don't have those guys either. So I think there's going to be times where that also kind of does look bad for the Nets, and just because they don't really have that personality, and Cam clearly isn't that guy. But overall, though, look, 6-man off the bench, microwave scoring, getting shots, like getting to the line. Dude's a freaking elite at this, man. He's so elite at drawing contact, maintaining balance in the air, scoring in bunches. Even when he goes 3 for 14, it's still 7 for 7 from the line, right? Like, so it's still, and that's exactly what you want as a guy to come off the bench and do, right? Come off the bench and do it. So, yeah, the defense thing is probably still going to stunt him a little bit here, but we know what he can do at an elite level, and I'm glad that we're probably going to see like 20 minutes of it a game in probably just the role that he needs to have.
And by the way, to mention back to the flexibility of how they look at these rotations, that's what's great about getting him on the court with Ben Simmons, some of your other starters at times, because you can hide that deficiency. It's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why isolating him inside of that second unit, I think, would actually be more problematic potentially for what he has to do defensively relative to the other talent on the court. We'll get back into that. Don't you worry, as we wrap up our preseason overall and prepare for the regular season next week. But coming up next, some bench unit standouts. Day'Ron Sharpe. Why did we ever doubt this guy being the backup five for the Brooklyn Nets? And Lonnie Walker reminds us that he has some championship level roster experience that he can bring to Brooklyn as well. We'll dive into that coming up next.
All right, I'm already in a good mood. Make myself in a better mood. Tell you about our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You got to snap into the action this NFL and NBA season right around the corner. Right now, over on FanDuel, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place just a $5 bet. Those $200 in bonus bets, you're getting that win or lose. So you kind of, in some ways, don't even need to worry about what you're putting in on it. You want to get in something good anyway. Maybe you're like Adam over there. You're still a Giants believer. I personally don't see it, but Adam's, Mr. Positive. Giants +2.5 against the Redskins at home over on FanDuel.
Lock it up, baby.
5 on that to get $200 back in bonus bets. Please stop it over there, FanDuel. Too good to us. Spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/locked-on. Kick off the NFL season, which is still going here. NBA season right around the corner. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we wrap up the final preseason game review for the Brooklyn Nets, 107-104 victory, by the way, against the Miami Heat, in case you're keeping track of that sort of stuff. Nobody should be, because it's over now and it's on to the regular season. But you mentioned, and we've talked about throughout this episode, that Jacque Vaughn has indicated where this rotation is going. Surprisingly is the wrong word. Lonnie Walker has just quietly kind of been here for the preseason. And then tonight when you come out, it's like, oh, okay. Looks like you were brought in for this reason. I mentioned it there, ending segment number 2. He's played on a high-level team. He's been in this kind of role for that team, and he showed capable of duplicating that. We can talk about him if we want to. The three-point shooting was great in the second half of this game, but Day'Ron Sharpe to me is the story here.
Hold on real quick before you move on to Day'Ron, before you move to Day'Ron Sharpe, because I just want to say one thing about Lonnie Walker. What do you think his plus minus is for the preseason? You want to take a guess?
+20.
+39.
Oh,
+39.
Doubled me up. I tried to go bold.
+39 for the preseason for one Mr. Lonnie Walker, the fourth, not the third, the junior or senior Lonnie Walker. He's making his great grandfather proud there. So +39 for Lonnie Walker. He's been awesome. He's been awesome. Getting to the rim, getting to the rack, like just hitting shots. Coming off the dribble, got into the mid-range a few times. So anyway, I know we're going to talk about Day'Ron, but I wanted to just point out, like, the Lonnie Walker, the plus-minus thing was just eye-popping to me when I was looking at it real quick before we jumped on here.
And he who is young, still 24 years old, but I'm going to lump him into, based on his experience of where he's played previously, I'm going to lump him in with the Royce O'Neals and with the Dorian Finney-Smiths of just, these are the experienced players that the Nets wanted to have be a part of their roster. We no longer go into the regular season. We'll debate whether or not they should be here in terms of some of the older guys. They are. And tonight, as I said earlier, it's like without those two veterans knocking down triples in the first half, this thing could have looked a little bit uglier before Lonnie Walker came on. Day'Ron Sharpe slimmed down a little bit this offseason. Guy nailed a triple in the second half, just in case you guys weren't keeping track of it. I was. He looks excellent from beyond the arc, 50%. Take that to the bank. But in all seriousness, he looks like he has taken that little step forward that you need to see from him, where when he gets on the floor, it's not just frantic high energy, which we value, and the Nets need some of that, but it's a little bit more under control now. And that means you can rely on him a little bit more, and you don't have to worry about fouling as much as you did in previous seasons. I think this was a really positive for a guy who had that little ankle injury, and we had a moment of concern. This is a really positive finish for him in the preseason going into the regular season, where he's going to have a role. He is a part of that top unit right now. And Jacque Vaughn spoke to this at the start of training camp. He said, we want to set up Day'Ron to have every opportunity to claim that role. It looks like, at least for now, he has.
He was great tonight. I don't know what else to say about it. Like he's obviously, we've already known that he's just a great like per minute rebounder. That's always been, he's been like that since day one in the league. Like actually one of the best per minute rebounders in the NBA. Now that doesn't always translate 1-to-1 to be able to stay on the court for long periods of time. You have to be able to do a ton of other stuff, but we know he has a nose for it. And we know that that's a place that the Nets have sucked at. Like, for lack of a better, more analytical word, over the last couple of years, they've completely stunk on the glass. They've gotten brutalized on the offensive and defensive glass. And with Day'Ron, it's just not as big of a problem, right? And if they are more committed to switching up the defensive schemes, he can stay on the court for much longer because they are going to be used to playing in a more of a drop coverage. You're going to hear drop. I've already heard it ad nauseum during the preseason from announcers. You're going to hear a ton now because they're switching things up. But Day'Ron can live in that world a bit easier if they're going to be committed to just switching things up on a more possession to possession basis. Any question about, I mean, I never really thought it was a question. We mentioned this specifically with the Giles episode, that the Giles minutes were circumstantial more than the plan.
Yes.
And like this just confirms it. Like he's the backup center right now. They're going to see what they have. He's probably a decent leash here to start the season. And it's hard to argue with the results here. I mean, 19 points, 11 rebounds, 99% true shooting because he was 6 for 7 from the field and 6 for 6 for the line. It just doesn't really get any better than that.
That 6 for 6 from the line is pretty critical because you know what else happened here? And it doesn't matter because he doesn't have to do it, in order to be successful by his own metrics. Nicholas Claxton did not. I'm talking about a guy that was doing side swipes on the outside of the rim on some of these free throw shots. It doesn't look like he has solved that problem yet. We know about Ben Simmons in that capacity. Day'Ron Sharpe being able to go to the line and knock those down with consistency, that matters. Like that can actually be a real asset to his game going into this season.
And they have to let him shoot more threes. He's shot. I mean, it's not the sample size is small. He shot 42% from three over, preseason and regular season stats for this guy over the last couple of years. Again, it's like 22 attempts, but they've gone in and they have to do more pick and pop stuff with him where this is like a concentrated effort to try to make it happen. Because that really would unlock some more stuff if they actually tried. We've always wanted to see Claxton do it. It's not going to happen. And Day'Ron at least has tried them. And some of it has been like junk time and stuff, but they've gone in. And I don't know. They have to just try this more. So it's really encouraging. Again, defensively, what he can do, if the Nets are going to be sort of just living with more of a hybrid defensive scheme, great. That's going to help him. And I think we're just going to see more minutes from him. And this last game, it couldn't have been a better regular season tune-up.
Yeah, and I'll tie a bow on Day'Ron Sharpe and maybe this episode as well, that the three-point shooting, you want to go back, check the tape. That's what we like to say. Locked on ACC, I got on with Candace Cooper, and she was a Tar Heel, covered Day'Ron, and I said, when can we expect him to hit three-pointers? Because that was a part of the prospect. She goes, not anytime soon, but it is a part of what he can develop. Combined with what you mentioned about drop coverage, when he was drafted, the first thing we said was, I don't know if this guy makes sense from a fit perspective for the Brooklyn Nets. Now you're finally seeing scheme and skill set are starting to marry here for him. So I'm excited to see what he can do. And it'll just be a matter of putting it together with consistency so the Nets can rely on him. Other than that, man, I'll just remind everybody one last time, preseason wrap up for our Friday episode, a lot of takeaways. Next week, we're going to do our official season predictions, records, right? Sleepers for the roster. So we have a really big upcoming slate as the regular season approaches.
Yeah, we'll close out the week. We'll get, like we said, we'll run into some Cam Johnson stuff, see where we are with that, and then going into, like you said, next week, we'll just have a smorgasbord of what's going on, predictions, how we think the season's going to go, all that. You can catch it on YouTube. You can catch it on the podcast feed where we're actually this season going to be a lot more committed. There's going to be, because there's multiple channels here, folks. Like we're in 2023, stuff lives in different places. So you're going to get live YouTube stuff like we're doing right now. Okay, we're doing live. We're going to be doing almost every game. Post game, we're going to be on live on YouTube, right? That's just not going to be live on the podcast feed. So if you live it on the podcast feed, post game, get over here on YouTube. Conversely, this year we are going to be doing more bonus content just on the podcast feed, right? So you have to be able to. It's going to be paying. It's going to pay off to be on both. It's just the way the world's going to work. And final piece of this puzzle is join subtext.com/locked-on-nets. Get inside the insider conversation. This is just a conversation. Not only like inside net stuff, but just the conversations that Adam and I have with each other about the Nets. Get in on what is going on in our minds on a daily basis when we're just allowed to text about the Nets all day long.
You wouldn't
Go to
believe what else we're talking about with this team when we're not specifically in front of you.
Exactly. So join subtext.com/lockedonnets. You can also text 973-559-2422. Free trial on that one. So you can just test it out, see how it goes. You will stick around like everyone else has. Join subtext.com/lockedonnets.
At its best, life is completely unpredictable. That is Lonnie Walker IV's second cousin, Christopher Walken.
I like how you were able to make Walker into Walken.
Yeah, you bought
because
it.
at some point, no, it makes sense. It makes sense because at some point it was all the same word and it just kind of diverged along the ancestral tree. So I totally get it. One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow and right after this break, live on YouTube from extra bonus content with more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, regular season basketball, yeah. Oh, baby. I know that we're live, Doug, but wow, what a journey. Preseason basketball is over. Regular season basketball time. Everybody in the live chat, we always appreciate it. When I came in before we went live, there was just a laundry list of comments firing off here inside of the chat. I always like to see that people are like itching to get in even before we've gone live. And I'll just highlight a couple here before we get to the specifics. As always, at Locked On Nets, if you got a question, feel free to shout it out. Let's throw it up here. Let's have some fun. Yeah, JV has no coaching IQ. Love that one from Anthony. Want to make sure we get everybody involved here. Fire Jacque Vaughn after the season. He's a waste of time. My holy king, a frequent flyer. Love you guys too.
It can't be based on this preseason. That's insanity. What do you see in the preseason? They've done so many things different. Like everyone's like, oh, you don't make any adjustments. Like this has been nothing but adjustments. Like this preseason has literally been one major adjustment. Like I just don't. I think that people. I'm all for wanting not liking coaches and stuff and thinking that the IKB I know better than whatever. Like I get that that's a core to NBA fandom is sitting out there and just thinking that you know better than everybody and not having any ideas. But I'm really shocked after this preseason to say that like this is a whole new cast of characters for the most part, right? You're dealing, you moved Cam. Everyone's been begging for Cam Thomas to get more playing time. They did it, right? Like everyone's been begging to not just only run a switching scheme. They did it. Make the offense more about Ben Simmons and have it be spacing. They did it. Like, I mean, good Lord, people, please, like, what does this guy have to do? Like, go out there and just I honestly am very curious about what anyone who said that would actually think the things what do they want to see happen that is not happening right now? It's like totally crazy to me.
Interesting point you bring that up, Doug. Let's fire up another comment here. Wrapping up the preseason. Trade Ned Claxton and Dinwiddie for a stretch big. Let's go, basketball boy. This is right. What we're talking about.
Put the real
Doug.
ones up. Put the real comments up here. I can't get pissed off. I'm in a good mood.
I'm having fun and you guys are all great. We always want to have the comments. My holy king completely appreciated that I put him on blast there at Locked On Nets. Hey guys, what is your opinion on Cam Thomas's performance? And what role could you see him going forward into this season? Could he potentially be all-star in the future? I hope so. This is kind of a bigger one from Brendan, which we appreciate. He's also frequently in on these. I don't want to overstate this season. We're going to have our preseason and season outlook. But I think everything is possible for him. He's obviously a high-level scorer at the NBA level. The question is always going to become team, system, and expectation. There are a laundry list of players in the NBA that score a ton of points for teams that don't win a lot of basketball games. The Brooklyn Nets want to be winning basketball games. So I just think he's still developing. He's still young, by the way. So I don't take anything overly negative. This was a good step forward for him this offseason, this preseason, this training camp, I think.
I think we saw what the plan was tonight. I think the plan is for him to be first or second guy off the bench and to run some, ISO heavy stuff, offense stuff, and hope that he takes some threes. It's so funny too. I think one thing that was a little disappointing from him tonight is still not firing the catch and shoot threes fast enough. Like he passed up 2 on where the closeout was way slow, and he opted to do something else. And then he seems just more comfortable, just like the step back threes, and he got fouled on one of them that went in. But it's just something to keep an eye on. But there was at least twice where it's like, come on, man, fire, let's go. And he just didn't do it.
The one note that I'll also have on that too is I've seen this across different sports as well. where when you start to tell a guy he needs to take the next step, right? So the all-around game has to develop. There then does become a hesitation around the thing you can do very well and immediately, like the shooting. Okay, be a part of the offensive system. Make sure you're making the extra passes. I think that can create a little hesitation in what the natural flow would be for him. It's not an excuse because there was in this game earlier, like, let's go, knock them down. Because by the way, you're after last season, you should be one of the better 3-point shooters we have on the roster. But so it is me giving a little bit of, I'm doing the both, right? Like, hey, some things didn't look so good. Also, I have nothing not to like about him going forward. What do we got here? I like this one. This is a big picture one. Someone screamed Adam. If you put my name in all caps, I'm going to put you up there. Do you think, oh, it's my Holy King. Get out of here, my Holy King. Knock it off. We'll talk about the finals later.
I want to.
You know what you should do,
want to
my
say,
Holy King, though? Watch this
I'll
plug
put up
real quick, Doug, and then I'll let you take this for a second.
Yeah,
you know what you do? You go ahead, and let me just make sure that I want to make sure that I give you the clear path to get there. I want you to, oh no, I'm messing up with the banners here because I got a comment up. I got to hide it. Head over to joinsubtext.com/lockedonnets, my Holy King, and a free 14-day trial. Fire that question off to me, and I will give you a soliloquy back in response. What do you got, Doug?
I was going to bring up one concern that I have from tonight, and this is like something of a carryover from last season. It was Ben Simmons only took 4 shots in 23 minutes. Like this is another thing I think that's worth keeping eye on. I saw someone post, I can't find it now, but I saw someone posting, he was like, oh, Ben Simmons can average 20 points or something like that if he's given the right personnel, which one, I don't think that's realistic. But 2, it does highlight a point about what, again, 20 points is ridiculous. He's never even come close to that in his career. But it highlights a thing about like what we could still keep seeing is 23 minutes and 4 shots from this guy is like kind of still not acceptable. And it is problematic. And it's not really how he's been rolling this preseason. There has been like some foot on the gas stuff right. But I mean, not totally. 8 shots, 5 shots, 6 shots, 4 shots. Like he's looked better. It's very encouraging that he's looked better and more athletic and clearly is out here on some kind of revenge tour for himself, especially in the media too, right? Mm-hmm. And becoming like a national narrative piece around it too, because like plenty of people have talked about it. He's still not taking many shots, and that just can't be the long-term thing. Like he has to be more aggressive when it comes to getting the rim. And I thought tonight was sort of like last season, where we were like, is he just not want to do it? Maybe the situation didn't always set himself up. Like even one time he turned the corner and I think it was Richardson. It was really early in the game. He turned the left corner, got over Richardson's shoulder. Now he did stumble a little bit, but he was already past Richardson. And I don't know if it was he passed because he had stumbled, but any other player in the NBA, there's no one between him and the rim. You at least put up the shot because you're getting fouled. Right. Yeah, and because you're like, oh, I'll just get fouled. And he passed it out and it looked like kind of a mess. And I was like, oh, I wonder if he still just doesn't want to do this. And I don't know. I'm a little worried about situations like that. And when you get to 23 minutes and 4 shots, it's just rough. It's a rough number to see.
And you mentioned, he went 2 for 2 at the line, which is always a perfection you want to see, but 2 points, right? 8 rebounds, 7 assists in 23 minutes. You can extrapolate that out and say the rebound and assist numbers are going to be beautiful on a game-to-game basis. But to your point, 20 points, that's way too lofty of a goal. But this has to be a guy that's getting you 10 to 14 points a night with consistency if it's going to be the both and of what he can facilitate this offense with. And then to your point about that, getting around the corner and not just finishing or getting the foul and going to the line, that's just taking the free points at that point, right? Like you have to take the points that are there. Yes, 3 is worth more than 2, but if you do that with consistency, there definitely would be a frustration there. Pull up some other ones in the background if you want, but I also we do our network, our channel meeting with all the NBA hosts earlier today. And I did say that we are only one quality Ben Simmons season away from, do you remember when we did the episode where I said, I think with, Ben Simmons gets back healthy, we could be talking about a guy that could earn another contract in the $25, $30 million range, baby. We are right back on track. Ben Simmons will be in those discussions if he has a season that's predicated on health. And in a serious note in this game, he went down hard going to the basket and got right back up. When we talk about health.
Yeah, worried about that one. Yeah.
He's bringing up like right back up to his feet. No concerns. Like the health concerns, I think, are mitigated completely going into this regular season.
Yeah, I think I agree that I think the health thing has turned the corner. I don't, what I'm concerned has not turned the corner is the reluctancy to shoot.
Yeah.
And at least shoot at the rim, like even getting to the rim and trying to get there. and sort of maintain an advantage with the size and speed, because there's some concerning numbers there. So I'm interested. This is something to keep an eye on. Again, it's all positive for the most part for me, and clearly at a much better place than last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a concern.
This is, I think, is a good question from Jonathan. Can Nicholas Claxton continue his offensive progression with Ben Simmons as the main point guard? We've talked about how they relate to one another inside of the offensive system. I don't know. It's like when we said about Day'Ron and being able to have a 3-point shot. We wanted that to maybe be something that happened with Claxton. It doesn't look like it's going to. Right now, Claxton's offensive game is coming from where it was last year. He can get out, space the floor, run the court. He has a little jump hook. He has some turnaround things working into his repertoire, but he's in and around the basket guy. So I don't think that his offensive game doesn't get hurt by Ben Simmons because there isn't anything to be damaged there. I think the unlock here is that with the spacing and Ben Simmons' size, Nicholas Claxton maybe just gets easier looks directly at the rim and around the basket. If to Doug's point, if Ben Simmons is going to show that he's willing to attack the rim at times, right? That's what opens up those little easy pockets.
Yeah, I think I've been encouraged what we've seen from Claxton here for sure. They ran a couple little actions with Simmons, where they did like this sort of like cross. It was like a hybrid DHO / like screen action where Simmons kind of worked diagonal. Not exactly like an Iverson cut. It's kind of hard to explain, but like if you saw it, you know what I'm talking about. He came sort of 45-degree angle to the basket and laid it off behind his back to Claxton, who was coming back over the top like maybe like a scissor action, and that actually worked really well because the defenders they both can get to the rim like really pretty efficiently if they have downhill speed. So I like that action that we saw a couple times. They ran it twice. You know which one do you remember this one I'm talking about? It's like
it
was like this crisscross scissor action at the top of the key. I had not seen them run that before.
And that I thought, I remember this going back to one of the other preseason games of Nicholas Claxton on ball in transition, where I said, him being able to get out and run with the basketball at his hand. Like, I think they're trying to create this. They're very similar in skill sets, but you can, because of their athleticism, you can create moments like you just highlighted, right? Where, hey, they both have the ability to go again, keep saying in theory with Ben Simmons to go at the basket. So you can really get defenses having difficulty sticking with assignments, switching coverages, and one of the two of them should always be an advantage going at the basket. Do you want to take a quick, we didn't talk about this in the episode. This is probably a tease for our preseason wrap up. The Bridges, the 0 for 3, the turnover. One thing I'll highlight from the preseason with Bridges. It's like when you see Cam Thomas and when he wants to go at the rim, he's going to get fouled and go to the line. He's going to make a bucket. I will say that Mikal Bridges' game going at the rim has looked gettable this preseason. And coming off the FIBA where it was so impressive, I'm chalking it up to like, hey man, he's had a long off season. Like he could use a little bit of a lull here. I don't have a concern around it, but there is this world where like Ben Simmons in this off season, it wouldn't shock me if we're really talking about Ben Simmons being the best player on this basketball team at some point this season relative to Mikal Bridges. He, at least, especially in tonight's game, great preseason game, Mikal Bridges was one of the guys. He wasn't one of the guys leading the rest of the players. Does that make sense?
If you tuned into this game as your first time watching basketball or the Nets, you would not think that Mikal Bridges was their best player. Is that what you're saying? Like, I think that's if this is how you tuned in and you were new to the team or you new to basketball in general, Mikal Bridges, really for the whole preseason has not popped off the page like the Nets' best player, as everyone would have universally voted for him to be going into this season. And I am not in any way concerned about it, but it is interesting sort of how it's working here. Like, because it just, the shots haven't fallen. I'm not really, it's not a concern for me, but I agree with you that it's like, it seems to be like there's an opening now, which 2 weeks ago, there would have been no opening.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there would have been,
No
it would have been no debate. Like you wouldn't really talk to, but we would have really wouldn't have realistically, honestly discussed that. And I don't think we still are. Like, I think you'd take Bridges 100 times out of 100, but maybe it's like 99 times out of 100 now or something. But yeah, like I think if you watch these games, you wouldn't. He's not been popping off the page at all, and I think it's worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, that's just something that's like an interesting narrative to follow into the season. Anything else you see in there? Anyone, feel free to shout it out. If you have any other questions or comments, we'll probably start to wind this thing down. Doug, again, I want to make sure we always reiterate this. We appreciate everybody coming
Yeah.
into these conversations, getting after us. And Doug did highlight, as a reminder, the podcast feed is going to feature some exclusive stuff over there throughout this season. And a lot of that is just inspired by the fact that everyone loves the post game lives when we do them. So we wanted to find another way to give you guys additional content that is 100% free. So don't miss out on that stuff. Let's see what like I'm gonna screen these first. I've been doing too much flippant posting up of the comments at times here.
Yeah, sorry, you've been on this more than I have. Here I was looking up like the usage numbers on Simmons as we were kind of talking about.
You can do that while I do this.
No, let's just I'll do this one here. What do you think about Claxton race for defensive player of the year? Coming from Wizards next Friday. Yeah, so I think that unfortunately the team, and we saw this last year, that even if he played at this level, the team will not be good enough to be in this conversation. And I think like that's what you end up running into, right? Like he said it. He was like, "Hey, I was in the DPOY conversation last year. Durant and Kyrie got traded, and that was the end of that." Like he didn't play any differently.
Yeah.
It was just the team's not good enough, and it doesn't always need to be the case, but it's hard to be a real low seed and be in this conversation at all. Like you just can't. I just think it's unfortunate. It's just like the way the voting goes, but I just think like you're not making it there unless it's like otherworldly beyond stuff, or which the team's just usually good. Like those Gobert teams were always good in the regular season with defensive player of the year. Smart, the Celtics were good that year. Like Triple J, they're good. You know what I mean? Like Drew, I'm getting these. Maybe I'm getting these defensive player of the year guys, but the guys that are even in contention at the end, like the team just has. I just think that the team has to be better than the Nets are going to be, and it's not a fair way to vote for it, but that's just the reality.
I also think too that it'll be interesting with how many defensively minded guys and the versatility they have. Like I think there'll be times when we identify 2 or 3 guys in a given game and say, "Oh, look how well, right, the switching here, the play over there, whether it's position independent. Dennis Smith Jr. comes in and he looks really good. Royce O'Neal does some good defensive work. Cameron Johnson does. You're going to start looking at the team in totality. So in the same way when there were stars and the elevated profile of the team gave Nicholas Claxton that chance, I think now the other way they'll go with it is, well, the team collectively is really good defensively, not just Nicholas Claxton, right? So there'll always be something unless you're a deep playoff run team. This one, I'll just highlight this last one. This could be my last one that I want to highlight, which is, are the Brooklyn Nets committed to signing Nick Claxton long-term? This is a good, like, season-long kind of narrative. Does it affect the Spencer Dinwiddie re-signing with the team and Ben's future on the team, especially if he does well? I think these are all the things to watch. Maybe not Spencer Dinwiddie so much. He's 30, going to be 31. But watch it at the start of the year. Watch it as you approach the trade deadline. And what you see over the course of this season when it comes to Nicholas Claxton in the big picture and Ben Simmons in the big picture, everything's going to be influenced by how this team performs as a collective unit and then individually. Because, again, next season, Ben Simmons' contract will be up. What is that going to look like? I already put out a very, I think, this is positive from an organizational standpoint. I think that there's worlds where next year at next year's trade deadline, we're talking about suitors for Ben Simmons because the Nets are still in the process of building back up to championship aspirations. This is not going to be that iteration of the team. So they're always
I'm going to go the other way. And I can't totally take credit for this. And it was something we actually you and I had not discussed. And I kind of filed it away to do at another time here. And it was it was either BK, and there's like, we're in some of the stuff on Twitter, but BK and 85, it could have been him. It could have been Brooklyn Beat. I can't remember who exactly posited this, but once I heard it, I actually couldn't unhear it. And that's that I think that Claxton is probably a pretty big candidate to be traded this year. And the Nets don't want to end up if they don't want to end up making a money decision here. And if like, they don't see themselves maybe as a playoff team or whatever, and they are going for a reset because like, hey, he's not the kind of guy we want to pay, but he has value and he could end up re-signing somewhere. Once I heard that, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's actually pretty strongly in the range of outcomes for him and might not be the worst move for the Nets either. And it's not an anti-Claxton thing. That's not anti-Claxton at all. It's just it's like pro-realism, like more than it's anti-Claxton.
And maybe that buttons it up, that idea of saying like everything that happens to start this year is going to influence all these guys, including Nicholas Claxton, right? If you're heading towards the midpoint of the year, towards the trade deadline, and the team is, kind of competitive, 7th, 8th seed. Okay. And that big, what, 25 million a year contract is looming for Nicholas Claxton.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that contract you would sign him to would be about, okay, now make it through the life cycle of Bridges and of Cameron Johnson. And then what about with Ben Simmons? So, and then after that, you end up with a really good player who we all like, but is on a roster that doesn't have any of those players.
That's what I mean. Like he's a tough guy to pay a lot of money for this kind of team. Like that's really what it is. It's like, again, he deserves to get paid. Like, I think he's going to command a pretty nice contract here. Good for him. Like life-changing stuff here for him. And he deserves every dollar of it.
I just wonder if pushing that agenda.
I just worry if the Nets are like not the right time to do it, like where they are as a team. And if they're looking to keep their powder dry for superstars to like sort of open up, contracts in that range are tough. And especially around just sort of like the kind of player he is. So this is like, we'll kick this can down the road. I had never considered it though until hearing it on Twitter, and this was like a couple of weeks ago. Never even commented on the thing, but once I heard that, I was like, I filed it away because I thought that is actually much more realistic, to the point where I was like, I bet you that might just happen, right? Like that's like, once I really walk through
now Doug went the other way. He never thought about it. Now he's assuming it's 100% real.
Because honestly, if you go through the reasons why you would do it, there were a lot of reasons to do it. Again,
and you can look around the league at championship caliber teams and go, oh, put Nicholas Claxton on that roster with his defensive ability. And all of a sudden you get this 1 through 5 switchable defender and everything that he would mean for a team like that. Yeah.
They could get to a point like, there's teams out there that could look at him and say, hey, as we make a run, it's a contract year, maybe we'll re-sign him. He fits better with like the overall thing that we're trying to do. The timeline makes a little more sense. I don't know, whatever. We can talk.
By the way, but that'll be a good thing to put out there before we kick off the season, because we've done this with like the veteran guys who we think should be traded. I mean, we'll do something like that. Guess what? Get onto the podcast feed, because a bonus episode would be a nice little 10-minute episode about listing out the potential tradable players on this roster entering the season. For as excited as we are about a lot of them and what this team can do, the list is far longer than it is shorter when it comes to guys that could be on the market for the Brooklyn Nets this year. I think I'm good here. Doug, are you good here?
Yeah, I'm great. This was fun. I love this. Yeah. This is the problem, whereas sometimes we need to set constraints around like just what's realistic about like going into the late night here. It's more about that than it's about wanting to do it. I think you and I could end up doing this for a while, but sometimes you got to just, you got to know when to hold them and then, know when to fold them, as they say. I think I just made that up.
That might be, you know what? And if I be honest with you 100% here, I might think about that as lyrics for a potential song of some kind. You know what I mean? The top of my head might make a good song. I don't know.
I can play guitar. Adam knows this. All right, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for everyone for sticking around. We are going to be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.